I had so many people tell me, I tried to give my book to your pastor, and he told me that, he heard from a friend that is a seminary professor at Southeastern Seminary, for example, that it's not the sort of thing he should read, or that, it will not be beneficial to the body to entertain this kind of material, things like that. And so, that was, I'm going to be honest, that was a bummer for me,
Hmm.
especially when my own grandmother told me I tried to give um, your book to my pastor, and he is friends with certain people that are very high profile in the SBC, and he would not take it. I had dear friends tell me the same, say I tried to give my book to your pastor, and because they heard that you were critical of someone like Tim Keller, which again is not, I was, but not in a way to say that, he's not a Christian or he's a wolf,
Right.
but just to say, I think he was off base on some of these positions that he took. They would say they just wouldn't read it. And so I think that was ultimately the goal of this discreditation campaign.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to the Alisa Childers podcast. I'm Alisa Childers, and it's always my goal to help equip Christians to identify the core beliefs of historic Christianity, discern its counterfeits, and proclaim the gospel with clarity, kindness, and truth. And today's episode is with our friend Megan Basham. We're catching up with her after her book came out. We interviewed her last year, and after her book came out, there was a lot of fallout. In fact, what I observed was the entire Big Eva machine, which we're going to define that in this podcast, but kind of these big evangelical platforms uniting together to really pool their resources to discredit her, to even convince people to not read her book, to not take her seriously, to dismiss her as conspiratorial or something like that. And we're going to talk specifically about some of the manipulative tactics that were used, because I've experienced a lot of these as well, just from different places when I've spoken truth into a certain area. And so we're going to talk about these because I want this to be helpful for you when you speak truth, maybe in your scenario, in your church, that these are some of the tactics that are sometimes used. I think this is incredibly important. We're calling this the discreditation machine that can get sort of mobilized. And we're going to talk about various points that could happen, various tactics that will be used to discredit and dismiss. But I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Brave Books. Brave Books is so awesome, you guys. It's a Christian children's entertainment company, and you can go to bravebooks.com/childers for 20% off your order. Again, bravebooks.com/childers. So as I mentioned, after Megan's book came out, I just saw so many people kind of mobilize against her. And there was even a whole article written that just basically said she was not a very smart person, and there really wasn't even any substance to the article. And yet a lot of people were very much swayed by this. So we're going to talk through 6 manipulative tactics that can often be used when somebody is speaking truth, especially when it speaks truth in an area that would implicate larger structures, okay? So some of the ones that we're going to be talking through today are something called prediscreditation, where somebody will almost try to discredit you before you can even say your point. We're going to talk about the shunning that can happen, the private conversations that can happen behind the scenes to try to get people to pull down content, to not agree, and kind of preemptive strikes that can happen. When people will focus on minor errors and miss the larger point, over emotional umbrage taking, preventing access even after the book comes out. And so ultimately, we're going to talk through some of these tactics. And I, again, share some experiences I've had. Megan shares some experiences she had. We hope this is helpful to you. So I'll take you now to my conversation with Megan Basham. So Megan, so great to have you back on the show. I want to just check in with you because since you were on last time, a lot has happened. The collective force of the big evangelical infrastructure has pooled its resources against you to try to cancel you. And then in the meantime, you get a cancer diagnosis. Give us an update about how are you doing with your health and with ministry and all the things?
Yeah, I will just say that 2024 was the biggest roller coaster of a year that I ever had. So, the book came out at the end of July, was informed that we hit the bestseller list sometime in August. I don't remember. And then, come November, it was, you have stage 3 advanced colon cancer diagnosis. So it was just a really wild few months there. I think providentially, God was like, I'm now going to sort of take you off the board a little bit for a while and just focus on your health. So went through 28 rounds of chemo radiation and then chemo, which is different, where they plug you into the infusion bag that you take home, and then a couple of surgeries. And at the end of all that, right now, I have been declared no evidence of disease, and my first blood tests are really good, not showing any sign of tumor markers in them. So, praising God for that and just continuing to pray that it doesn't come back.
Yeah. Well, we'll be praying for you with that as well. And I'm really interested in the topic we're going to be talking about today because I have an interesting perspective, even as it relates to you and your work. And that is what we're calling the discreditation campaign.
I think
And
we
so
coined that term. Yeah.
I think we are coining the term, the discreditation campaign. And we're going to talk about, first of all, give us a little definition of what we're talking about when we use that phrase. And then I want to frame it up with a couple of thoughts before we get into our main points here.
Yeah. So to me, what it is a backroom effort. So the difference between, straightforward debate, publicly saying, I disagree with some of these things that she said, or straightforwardly saying, here's a point I'd like to argue. It's more doing it in the background. So it would be, calls to people to not platform this person or to pull endorsements or pull interviews. And it's also kind of trying to miss the point deliberately, saying that instead of talking about some of these big issues that this book brings up or that this evidence that was presented, instead what we're going to do is go, hey, the footnote on page 53 actually led to the wrong article. And so I think
Right.
based on that, we can't really consider this evidence. So it's kind of an exercise in missing the point. And, the difference between that and just kind of average evangelical infighting is that I would say it's organized and it's intentional. So it's an intentional discreditation campaign.
Okay, and for anybody who maybe missed your book or missed my last interview with you, can you just give us the main thesis of your book? Because this is a book that I promoted. I was waiting for with bated breath because I had been reading your articles leading up to it, and when I read it, it blew my mind. I thought it was the most important book of the time when it came out, and probably still is in many ways. But give us just kind of the elevator pitch of what your book proved, what the case that you were making was.
So the case that I was making was that a number of evangelical institutions and leaders, names names you may love, to one degree or another on the conservative side, I didn't, really spend much time on known liberals or progressives because I figure everybody knows where Al Sharpton is, right? I don't need to write about Al
Right.
Sharpton. But the people that we know and respect and trust, how they were getting involved in various initiatives on a lot of political issues, climate change, immigration policy, LGBTQ indoctrination. And they were modifying their positions in a progressive direction based on either taking payments from large secular left organizations, people like George Soros, the Clinton Foundation, Bill Gates, people like that, or they were doing it in a way to appeal to the dominant culture and the elite culture to say, okay, I want a seat at the table with the Atlantic Council or the Aspen Institute. And that is sort of your price for entry, is that suddenly you become much more winsome on an issue like whether to use trans pronouns. You will say something like, let's use pronoun hospitality. And in some cases, I detailed people who I was not saying, that this is a person who deliberately did this, but also showing, okay, how is this impacting people further down the ladder? So if you have a new generation of young pastors, how are they being catechized by these people who are deliberately selling their influence?
Yeah, okay, that's very good. And one example of this that you brought up in your book would be like the after party curriculum. So can you talk just a little? I just want to give people concrete examples so that they know what we're talking about.
Right. So the after party curriculum was a political Bible study, essentially, that three people, David French, New York Times columnist, Russell Moore, editor in chief at Christianity Today, and Duke Divinity professor Curtis Chang, put together to move into churches and on Christian college campuses to try to teach how to have more gracious dialogue and sort of winsome politics. But when you dug down into it, as your friend Natasha Crane, just really ably, if you have not read her article, go read her article, showed that what it really did was act as sort of an apologetic for progressive positions, or to make it easier to vote for the candidates who would be most in favor of abortion or the LGBTQ agenda. And, my part of that was digging in and going, actually, look who's funding this political Bible study that was promoted by the Christian Council, the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, which represents 185 member schools, including Biola, who you've recently talked about. And this was funded by Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, which is a very hard left secular foundation, that has millions and millions of dollars to give out every year, and also by the Hewlett Foundation, which is one of the largest funders of abortion in the country. So, I think that a lot of people would be very startled to know that this material that we're bringing into our church is funded by people who hate our values and who disagree with everything we stand for.
Right. And so that should be a concern. And so here I am, so naive. I'm thinking, everybody's going to be so thankful for this book because she's really exposing some serious corruption. She's shining light on some things that I know that if people knew about, they would be so thankful that somebody did this work. Well, that was not the response from a lot of people. Now, there were many people that were very supportive of you, but what I watched happen was kind of breathtaking. So just from my perspective, your book comes out, I read it, I'm like, this is a slam dunk. This is so important for people to get in their hands. So I promote it. I have you on my podcast. And then I watch people kind of come together to ultimately cancel you. And Megan, I got to tell you, the way you duked it out on X and in article writing was just really breathtaking. I don't know where you got the energy or the courage to just keep swinging and keep answering, because people and then somebody would say something, and then somebody with more influence would write an article, and you would just answer and continue to answer everything. And what we're talking about is really what we talk about when we say Big Eva. Now, I want to define that because a lot of people, I think, may not be aware of the connections of different evangelical groups. So Big Eva is actually a term that was coined by Carl Trueman. In fact, I've got the article up here, and he talks about it this way. I'll just quote from his article. He said, "What Big Eva has done is create an economy of power, people, and indeed money, which is non-ecclesiastical but highly influential within evangelical churches. It's a populist movement of tremendous influence and minimal accountability. It provides an identity for its most passionate acolytes. And because it promises rewards to individuals and organizations, whether it's influence, students, platform, it is both very hard to criticize and functionally unaccountable to any but its own." And so he was kind of writing this in context of the Revoice conference. So he said, unfortunately, the culture of Big Eva both facilitates the influence of a conference such as Revoice and makes an effective response unlikely. So when Revoice comes to be, because of all of these connections, they're not probably going to speak out too much against it. And so it created quite a difficulty for anybody that was trying to speak out against what was going on with Revoice. So that's the Big Eva thing. And what we saw were collective different groups unite essentially to try to get people to not read your book, to discredit you. And this continues. And I'm just going to share a quick personal story about this as we go on, because this has happened to me in regards to your book. So when I promoted your book, when I had you on the podcast, I had people reach out telling me, Gavin Ortland posted a comment asking me to take the interview down, like that would be the right thing to do, because obviously you've been totally discredited and nobody should be able to hear your side of your research. That was one thing that happened. But then I had a big thing happen kind of behind the scenes where someone who I had worked with, who's a huge champion of my work since 2017, basically cut off all ties with me professionally because I promoted your book. And that wasn't all, then proceeded to go behind my back to very influential people and try to discredit me to them as well. And I know that because those people all came to me and told me. Right. And I don't think it worked. But It could work, and it does work sometimes. And I'm sure in many cases it probably did work. I don't know all the people that this person
Right.
did that with, so who knows? And so I want to talk about this discreditation campaign that can happen. So let's talk about this this framing. So
Mm.
number one is what you're calling pre-discreditation. So when John West was on my show talking about Stockholm Christianity, you realized some similar things that he had been through and that you had been through. Am I framing that right? I'll just let you take it
Yeah.
from there. Quick pause here to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Brave Books. You guys, we are heading into the holiday season. We're heading into Christmas. And I know you're thinking about gifts for the children in your life, maybe your grandkids, your nieces and nephews, maybe your own kids. I want to show you some of the gifts that I'm going to be giving to family members from Brave Books this year. This one is going to be going to my grandniece. This is Mouse in the House, which is kind of like a Christian alternative to Elf on the Shelf. It actually comes with such a cute little stuffed animal that I forgot to bring from the house. But I love this book because it gives the reason that we gather at Christmas time, and that reason being God gave us his one and only son, Jesus, who came down from heaven to bring us hope, peace, joy, and the greatest love we'll ever know. And there's just these beautiful illustrations, and you can read the book and give the little mouse in the house instead of Elf on the Shelf. This is a cookbook, a family cookbook that's going to be going to my niece. And there's just sweet little recipes in there. I just love it. And then my grandkids are getting the Brave ABC book so they can learn their ABCs. So many great options. Go to bravebooks.com/Childers. Get 20% off your order. Stock up for the kids in your life. Also check out their streaming platform, which is Brave Plus, because they have a lot of specially curated content for young kids that is not going to facilitate a short attention span, and it's also going to promote good values and Christian values. So bravebooks.com/Childers for 20% off. Again, check it out, bravebooks.com/Childers.
Yeah, and that was really when I started thinking about this because, as you said, and maybe I'm a little too eager for a fight sometimes, I don't know. But when I was going through cancer treatment and it was just kind of like hit after hit after hit, the one good thing was I was not doing sort of my day job as much. Obviously I was not up and taking care of my kids in the way I would normally be. And I was not doing work for the Daily Wire on new reporting like I would normally be. So it was like I actually was in a position just kind of sitting there with my phone getting chemo treatments to respond to things. And
Yeah.
so I did, these articles would come out, and because I had the time and nowhere else to go, I would sit and pull out receipts and respond to a lot of them. And so when I was listening to an interview with you and John West, who, let me just say, his book
So good.
also for me, I actually wish it had come out first because
Mm.
I might have done some things differently and framed some things a little differently just because he gave a fuller presentation to me of, oh, that's part of what's happening here is that, this money may come in or this influence machine starts working, and people like these professors who are now moving left don't realize that they're being caught in it in this sort of Stockholm situation. And anyway, I loved his book and heard him talking with you about how people had tried to discredit him and his work, even though, he's well known, he's very well respected. So he's
Mhm.
not some upstart from the Daily Wire. And I
Right.
went, oh, this sounds extremely familiar. And, to start, in terms of, and I'm going to use kind of my list because I made some notes about, okay, here's what I think I experienced that I have now heard from others that they've experienced too when they try to hold Big Eva accountable or to at least open up a field for debate on some of these concerns that they have. So the first one was that John said that he had a conservative Christian publisher, not, a secular publisher, not a more progressive publisher, say, if you're going to write this book, we need to see a list of who you're going to talk about. And I think he said when they saw Andy Stanley, they said, I'm sorry, we can't publish your book. And I went through similar things with publishers where when they saw that I was going to talk about certain people like JD Greer, they just said, we don't want to publish this book. So, I experienced that from the outset. And then another part of this pre-discreditation and the entire discreditation machine starts with the friendship networks, as you described. There's calls to people that are friends and they know each other. And so it's kind of leaning on that person and pressuring them saying, hey, if you value our relationship, please don't give voice to this person. And an example of that was once I ended up with a secular publisher, the Broadside imprint over at HarperCollins. The National Association of Evangelicals and their president, Walter Kim, called Harper Christian, so another imprint at HarperCollins, reached out to them and basically sent an email saying, we have heard rumors about this book that is going to be coming out. And we're just concerned, and we'd love an opportunity to share our concerns with you. And at this point, no one had read it. No one knew what was in it. Because we have these friends in common, and we just know that so many of our friends have published books with Harper Christian. So we just like the opportunity to talk about this book. And so it seemed very obvious to me that it was an attempt to say, hey, this could be discrediting for HarperCollins if you guys publish this book. So there were a lot of instances like that. I'm looking at other ones.
Well, I can give one while you're looking.
Yeah.
And this is anecdotal. This is just our experience that we're sharing here. But I have friends who wrote a book, and their publisher said, you can't criticize this person in this book. And they gave them a name of the person that because it actually wasn't even that critical of this one particular author. It was really respectful, but like, here's what this person said. Here's where I disagree with what they said, and I would nuance it differently, but they weren't even allowed to do that. So it was a huge battle to, and then the decision is like, well, do we chuck the whole book or do we concede? And that's a tough decision, to do. And I'm very thankful that, at Tyndale, they've never asked me to do anything like that. I just want to say I've had such a great experience working with Tyndale. I'm very thankful for them. But I would also hope that if an author wanted to disagree with me and they were signed on Tyndale, that Tyndale would say, yeah, you can disagree. We're not going to say that just because we have this sort of relationship that you have to silence your disagreement, because it's bringing the disagreements into the public square they think is so important. And what we're talking about with the discreditation machine is that it kind of silences the criticism.
Exactly. And again, I mean, I think that's the ultimate aim, is to try to prevent accountability and reform, where some would, and I would be one of them, would argue it's very necessary. And so, that then went on. And once the book came out, because thankfully, and I'm just going to say quickly that providentially, I think God put me in a position where this did not touch me the way it would have if I had still been working at a Christian magazine. I think it would have been very difficult to resist that kind of pressure. And it just so happened that, I was with a secular conservative media organization, even though, that wasn't originally my life plan. And then I ended up with a secular conservative imprint with a wonderful, strong Christian editor, but at a secular conservative imprint where, again, the influence that may very well have worked had I been with my original evangelical publisher, or if I'd still been working in an evangelical outlet, would have been much, much more difficult to withstand. So I just felt providentially positioned that we're going to put her over in this place where she really can't be touched by these efforts. And so then the book came out, and one of the first things I noticed was how I wouldn't see pastors, well-known pastors, or Christian media figures engaging with the material. In fact, a lot of times they would say, I'm not going to read that. And one of the big examples that, first popped out to me was, and I know he's a friend of yours, but I'll bring this up. Sean DeMars did an interview with TGC editor Brett McCracken, the Gospel Coalition editor Brett McCracken, where they both admitted they didn't read the book, but they kind of said, I would not give my attention to that kind of thing. And I think we have a clip of that.
Yeah, let's show that clip real quick.
In light of that, do your research. So I've not read Megan Basham's Shepherds for Sale. It's just not the kind of thing I want to give my time and attention to.
Yeah.
But what I've heard from everyone is that it's extremely well researched, and TGC was like right in the crosshairs of that.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you guys in your world thinking about what she's saying about you? And also, I don't even really know what she's saying about you. I mean, I get the essence of it, Shepherds for Sale.
Yeah.
Is it basically just going back to like you've been funded by people with nefarious purposes? Is that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, I haven't read it either. And yeah, I think the gist of it is this narrative that like Big Eva, like these evangelical institutions have some sort of agenda to normalize leftism or kind of, bring
churches down.
kind of a woke path.
Right.
And it's just absurd, and the truth is so opposite to that. And yeah, so I don't know what to say except I just shake my head, and it's an example of like selective facts that suit your narrative and ignoring the facts that don't. Look at the output of TGC on very conservative issues. Spend any amount of time actually researching that, and you'll see that we have been outspoken, adamant about standing with God's word on the very contested issues in our culture. And it's not without costs, and we lose people on the left constantly, but we're okay with that, right? Because we want, if you lose people on the extremes because they don't like that you're doggedly committed to God's word, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's a loss that you can take. And we experience that all the time at TGC on both sides.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think for me, that's what gives us credibility. And I hear this all the time from people who view TGC as trustworthy precisely because we're so willing to take hits all the time from people, because we're not doing it for applause from this tribe or that tribe. We're trying to seek the truth. We're trying to do that slow work of seeking the truth and how God's word and the gospel applies to these fluid cultural conversations. And we don't always get it right. And I'll be the first to say that sometimes we publish things that we shouldn't have published, and we could have been more careful. But we are pursuing truth in the sense of God's truth. That's our number one goal.
Yeah.
And we could care less about political agendas or pet projects of donors. That doesn't drive TGC at all. We don't have big donors. I wish we did. So we're not beholden to anyone close to George Soros. Yeah. So that's just laughable. We just laugh at that because
Yeah, and I do want to just make kind of a caveat here too, that we're going to be discussing people. Like I said, I think Sean is a good Christian brother. He loves the Lord. I've been on his show. But this is just an example. When we're giving examples, I just want the listeners to hear us. First of all, I've reached out to Sean to let him know we're doing this. I don't want him to feel sideswiped or anything like that. But this is kind of an example of that's important to bring out, because when somebody says, "Oh, nothing to see here," kind of don't look over here, then that's the kind of thing where you've even called this point to "not our thing, dear." So go ahead and comment on what you're seeing in that clip.
Yeah. So in Not Our Thing, Dear, it was kind of this subtle suggestion that it would almost be sinful to read my book. Like there's something prurient there. It's not the kind of thing you should give your attention to. And then, further, Brett McCracken guessing what's in the book regarding the Gospel Coalition. And anyone who's read my book knows I'm actually very specific about this is the quote, or this was the comment, or this is, the piece of material that they put out that I'm commenting on. So it wasn't generalizations. And so both of them admit we've never read the book, but we're sort of guessing what's in it. And we find it just unsettling, not nice. It's not a respectable thing that she's written here. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Brett McCracken says something like, "We don't take money from George Soros." We just laugh at that as a way to sort of suggest that the book is not true, or that I write things that aren't true, when I've never accused the Gospel Coalition of taking money from George Soros. I've never accused the Gospel Coalition of taking money from any secular foundations. I do accuse other people of taking
the
money
ones that
from
actually
George
did.
Soros.
Right.
Yes, and they did. And I show you the receipts for that money. I show you how much. I show you, when they got it, what it was used for. So that's the kind of thing that you see is exaggerating or mischaracterizing what's in the book to suggest it would just almost be not a Christian thing to do, to mm-hmm. entertain the evidence in this book. So mm-hmm. that was kind of what I meant by "not our thing, dear."
Right. That's good. And also, just to add to that point, is when this particular person cut off relationship with me over my promotion of your book, that was the issue too. It was because I promoted your book. Mm-hmm. And if I was going to continue with that and not retract that, then the professional relationship was done. Now, this person had also not read the book, but said they started reading it, but it felt conspiratorial. That was the main issue. Just it felt conspiratorial. They didn't actually engage with the arguments, didn't engage with what was actually going on. And I just remember thinking, like, come on, guys, we're better than this. We're smarter than this. We know not to just judge something because it feels one way or another way. Actually, look at the claims, look at the receipts, and see if what Megan is saying is true. And so that is kind of like, oh, this isn't our thing. We don't want to be conspiracy theorists. We don't want to be, too Trumpy or too Christian nationalisty or whatever it might be that they are kind of, the vibes of it they don't want to be associated with. And so I think that's kind of to your point of where that is the second tactic of not our thing, dear. So the third one is shunning. Talk about shunning. This fall, Good Ranchers is calling America back to the table. So from now through Thanksgiving, join Good Ranchers every Thursday night for a simple but meaningful challenge. Sit down and share a meal with your family. This is something that's very important to me. We do it as often as we possibly can, and Good Ranchers makes it so easy. I have my better than organic chicken, triple trimmed. I have my grass-fed beef, heritage breed pork waiting in the freezer, so I don't have to think too hard about what that meal is going to be. So whether it's with your family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, this is your chance to step away from the rush of everyday life and return to where connection begins at the table. So here's what Good Ranchers wants you to do. Once a week, one lucky table will win a free Thanksgiving ham. And this is just for sharing a photo of your Thursday night dinner on their Instagram story. So you can post that to your Instagram story, use the hashtag back to the table, and tag Good Ranchers. And if gathering once a week just feels impossible right now, this is where Good Ranchers can really help. All of their meat is high quality, 100% American raised on local farms and delivered right to your door. Right now, when you go to goodranchers.com and use my code Alisa, you're going to get $40 off plus a free meat add-on for the life of your subscription. So check it out for yourself today. Go to goodranchers.com, use my code Alisa, goodranchers.com. Let's get back to the table.
Yeah, and that also kind of goes in with that not our thing, dear. And, I just want to address the conspiratorial thinking. There are efforts behind the scenes that people don't see. People do work together to achieve certain political or social goals. So you can call that conspiracy, but it does happen. And it's very important to separate, just general speculation from, okay, well, wait a minute, I can show memos coming from George Soros's Open Society Foundation, where people at the top of that organization are saying we need to find a way to influence conservative evangelical Christians because they have become a problem in some of this legislation that we want to get passed. And we can then see, okay, well, they then helped found a front group called exactly like the Evangelical Immigration Table. And then later within their own documents, we can see they said, okay, we were able to gain some access to the Southern Baptist Convention through the Evangelical Immigration Table and our partners at the umbrella group, the National Immigration Forum. That's a lot of names, I know that. But my point is, if someone isn't sort of laying all that out for you and isn't showing records, then yes, you should be concerned. But if someone is able to show hard records and they're able to show here's the work that was done with this money and with these initiatives, then that's not conspiracy, that's reporting. So It's important to distinguish between those two things. And so then when we moved on to shunning, it felt like immediately after the book came out, I had friends and, they told me this in confidence, so I don't necessarily want to put people on the spot because this wasn't on record. But even within Christian media organizations and friends I have, they told me, I got a call from someone associated with the Southern Baptist Convention or this particular seminary. And they suggested that it would not be a great idea to interview you, that it's going to be discrediting to us if we give you that platform, even if we're asking hard-hitting questions. And in some of these interviews, I did get asked some hard-hitting questions. I got asked about some of the criticism, and I appreciated having the opportunity to respond to it. But they were told even to do that could be discrediting for you, that if you have her on. And then there were people, as you suggested, that you experienced, who asked for the interviews just to be taken down entirely. And again, someone I know who I don't want to put on the spot, I did an interview with him. The interview was taken down for a while, I suspect, as a result of these kinds of calls. As you said, Gavin Ortland, after our interview, kind of posted underneath our interview saying, Alisa, honorable people have taken down. I don't remember the exact verbiage.
I've got it right here. Here's what it said. Right. And I'll set this up by saying, I've had a public conversation with Gavin back during the Asbury thing. I've really loved and continue to love a lot of the work Gavin does. And that's one of the things I really want people to hear us say. Like you've mentioned SBC. I think you go to an SBC church. Is that correct?
I love the
and
SBC.
Me too. And me too. Like, I think what we're trying to do is just shine light. We're not saying you have to leave your SBC church. We're not saying you have to stop watching Gavin Ortlund videos or Sean
Right.
DeMars. We're just saying, like, we just want to show, like, how this works and where we disagree, right? So Gavin posted under my YouTube, Alisa, the misrepresentations in Meg's book are clear and in some cases simply matters of fact and biography, claims about what I have read, which I actually corrected that when I responded back to him, because you didn't make a claim about what he read. You were quoting Carl Beisner, who said it was his quote that he said he probably hadn't read it. He said, this has nothing to do with Big Eva trying to discredit her. It has to do with me, an individual person, responding to specific claims made that are factually and verifiably incorrect. I disagree with that. But so he goes on kind of defending, and he said, here's where he asked me to kind of take it down. He said, others who have platformed the book have deleted their videos, which was honorable. I encourage you to reconsider. No culture war is worth sacrificing integrity over the process. However right we think the larger end is, telling the truth matters. And then, he offered to give more evidence as to why you're so wrong about everything. And I don't know if I've got my quote or that I responded back to him right in front of me, but the point that I made is, yes, truth does matter, and no culture war is worth sacrificing truth, because actually, with all of the pressure that was on in that moment, for me to just delete it and do my penance would have been way easier. There was so much pressure from all the places. That would have definitely been the easier way. So,
I feel terrible hearing about this, by the way. I didn't know that was going on.
Thank you for
and
this.
I just feel awful.
No, I thank you for it, because I think that's one of the things that we all get tested with every once in a while, is like, where are our loyalties? Are our loyalties to Christ and to truth, or are our loyalties to these kind of bigger voices that have influence that really could disparage you publicly and ruin your reputation if they chose to? I'm not saying that's what Gavin did, but the pressure for somebody like Gavin, who is so respected, and for good reason on many counts, to make a statement like that. I mean, it would have been so much easier to say, you know what, you're right, I got beside myself, I'll take it down. But no, it's because I believed in what I said, and I thought you brought the receipts and you proved what you said true. Yeah, I mean, you had a couple of mistakes in your footnotes, which thankfully Big Eva combed through every single one of your footnotes. So your second and third editions will be absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect.
It's
but
helpful,
yeah, so yeah, I felt that pressure even as somebody who promoted you. And so, yeah, that is for sure. The shunning is a type of thing. And that's what I brought up SBC, because I've really tried to resist that. Like, if Gavin says something I agree with on X, I'm gonna agree with it. I'm gonna like it. Or if, my SBC church is solid, I'm gonna stay there, and it's like we can shine light and disagree without making the assumption that if you actually disagree with somebody publicly, you're throwing them under the bus or calling them a wolf. And that's the one thing I said to Gavin too, is I said, her book was not about you. I mean, you're very minor part. She was just showing how kind of the downstream effects of some of these things show themselves just on the kind of the ground level. She never accused Gavin of being a shepherd for sale or taking money for any kind of thing. But, I think once people, in my opinion, if they watch his videos, watch your critique, listen, read your book, you can see that you've characterized it accurately, but we won't rehash that because we've done a lot of that. But that shunning is something that you feel the pressure to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to associate with Megan because obviously that's the honorable thing to do.
Well, yes. And, a few things I want to say about that, just because, Gavin really did become sort of for some inexplicable reason to me, the tipping point for the book, where people were either going to read it or not read it. And I had so many people go, my pastor won't read it because of, this dust up with Gavin Ortlund. And again, it was a very small and very specific. I'm not an apologetics person. I'm becoming apologetics person because of you. But but it's not, it's not really my field. It's not what I focused on. And so, it was very focused on climate change because that was what was in my chapter. And we can have disagreements about, what I felt that his video presented. But the response to you, that was helpful. It's just a helpful illustration because it was public, whereas other things that have been told to me were not public. So, the suggestion that if you leave this video up, you are lacking in some integrity. If you decide to do an interview with her, you're doing something possibly dishonorable. And so while you left the video up, others took them down. Others took down our interviews. And that was difficult. And I think, one that I know came down, he later went and reviewed the evidence and put it back up. So I know that happens. But, it's just a really good illustration of a public thing that illustrates what was happening in the background at scale a lot more often.
Right. And didn't you offer to have a public conversation with Gavin? Am I remembering that right?
Yes. So Frank Turek offered to host both of us, and I was willing to do that. And Gavin didn't feel that it would be productive. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. I love all of our sponsors, and I love that as we head toward Christmas, we're thinking about gift giving. What a perfect stocking stuffer or host gift or gift to give to the coffee lover in your life. And that is 7 Weeks Coffee, which is America's pro-life coffee company. They're on a mission to fund the pro-life movement, one cup of coffee at a time. They've just hit an amazing milestone thanks to so many of you guys. They have given over $1 million to the pro-life movement. They're called 7 Weeks Coffee because at 7 weeks, the baby is the size of a coffee bean. And that's when you can first clearly detect a heartbeat on the ultrasound. So that's why they donate 10% of every sale to support pregnancy centers all across the country. They have funded these centers across 50 states, providing ultrasounds, resources for moms in need, and real hope for families. So also, it's just the best coffee you're ever going to have. It's mold-free, pesticide-free, shade-grown, low-acid, organically farmed, checks all the boxes. Check it out for yourself today. Stock up for Christmas. Go to 7weekscoffee.com and save 15% forever when you subscribe, plus you'll get a free gift. But if you also use my code Alisa, you're going to get an extra 10% off your first order. So stock up in that first order. Go to 7weekscoffee.com. Use my code Alisa for up to 25% total savings on your first order, plus your free gift. 7weekscoffee.com. Use my code Alisa. So John West kind of described something similar in the apologetics world, and we're going to show this tweet here. And this is kind of something that touched my world a little bit. And again, I have a lot of respect for everybody involved. Mike Lacona's work has been very helpful to me, especially during my faith crisis. And I respect so much of the stuff he does. So it's nothing personal. It's not anybody calling anybody a wolf or not a brother or something like that. But John West posted on X that, basically this sort of a thing was going on where if you're kind of opposing this person, then the pressure to disassociate or to shun is kind of strong. And so we're looking at that tweet right now. It says, I don't like airing things in public, but since you cast public aspersions on my Discovery Institute colleague Jonathan McLatchie, you have basically forced me to do so. And this is him talking to Mike Lacona. And so he goes on and kind of defends Jonathan McLatchie, who had brought up some concerns about Lacona's view. And also I had John West on my show to talk about those as well. And he just went on and said, from my standpoint, it felt like a behind-the-scenes effort on your part to pressure me and his other supervisors to clamp down on his outside activities. So rather than going to Jonathan directly, he contacted an influential third party and write up a complaint. And so this is the kind of way that sometimes this discreditation machine can work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've heard this. That was what was interesting to me, was to go, okay, mine's just one little piece of this. To hear from so many people in different areas of evangelicalism going, that actually happened to me when I tried to critique a large and powerful institution or person. So, that to me is the broader issue here, is that these are unbiblical mechanisms that we're using to resolve differences. I can tell you another example was that I heard from pastors who told me, we're both SBC, that their state convention leadership would call them and say, could you not carry the book in your bookstore, in your church bookstore or your ministry bookstore? And we're talking about officials now. So formal organizations saying, can you please, at your large church or even small church, please don't carry her book in your church bookstore. And I knew nothing about it until months and months later. And that was just astonishing to me, that these organizations would not let the debate happen, would not let the debate carry out, but instead let's try to find ways once again to keep this evidence out of people's hands. So to me, that's what's been going on.
Well, and I will say this, I know for a fact, because I know this person very well, and I'm not going to use a pronoun, not because I'm doing pronoun hospitality, but because I don't want anyone to know if it's a man or a woman. But one of the endorsers of your book was called to, the word was repent for endorsing your book by a very influential pastor, very, very high profile, well-known pastor called one of your endorsers to repent of their endorsement. So
Exactly. So
yeah.
I did not lose any endorsements, by the way. So I would just like to say that those who endorsed the book, stuck with the book.
That's right. Well, you don't endorse a book like that unless you know what you're getting into. I have a feeling. All right. So the fourth one here is seize on minor, rare errors. This was one of the most frustrating things that I saw happen with your book. I start seeing on X, well, I didn't go to that seminary. She got that wrong. Therefore, she must be wrong about everything. You're just like, okay, people don't realize, first of all, my first book, Another Gospel, I was so proud of all of my footnotes. I mean, I spent years double checking, making sure everything. And my editor still found a couple of errors in my footnotes. Right. And then, people find it's human error is going to happen on minor points in absolutely every book. Now, your book will be perfect here going out because, like I said,
it will be, yes.
After this, there will be no mistakes. But talk about seizing on minor, rare errors, like any book of this length is going to have.
Yeah. So, I can give you a really high profile example. Phil Vischer did a whole video saying, I didn't say this about abortion. He actually did say that about abortion.
He did,
just
I
didn't
know.
say it in I accidentally linked to the wrong podcast episode of his show. And so he was saying, I watched that podcast. I didn't say it. But he said it in many other places and has very publicly said that we need to be more nuanced about abortion. And in fact, has also said that he might allow for abortion very early in a pregnancy. So if anything, I kind of downplayed what his position was. And it was literally a one-sentence reference in the introduction. And so that's how much I was footnoting everything. Because my first after ending up at HarperCollins, my first publisher had been through a terrible lawsuit over Senator Rand Paul's book. So they obsessively made me, and it was actually ended up being a blessing, but they obsessively made me footnote everything. So, people who have said it's so well researched, it has so many footnotes. Well, now you know why, because they really wanted to make sure everything was buttoned up and there would be absolutely no way for anyone to pursue a lawsuit. So, that was one. Another one, again, was someone saying, I didn't go to that seminary. I went to another seminary. That was just a mistake on my part and things that need to
wasn't
be fixed.
relevant to the point you were making
it wasn't relevant
about
to
what
the
they were
point
saying.
at all.
Yeah.
And some of them were claimed errors that I have again and again told these reviewers, it's not true. It's not an error. You're incorrect, and they just ignore it. And I'm just going to be public about this because it's a public review. For example, Samuel James, who blogs at Digital Liturgy, and he's a well-known TGC writer, said that I was in error in saying that Southeastern Theological Seminary did not invite climate change critics to a conference that I wrote about that took place in 2021. And he said, this is, she made a mistake. I found a web page showing that Dr. Cal Beisner of the Cornwall Alliance for Stewardship, which is very different from Creation Care, they are climate change skeptics, that he was invited to this. Well, he had it wrong in a number of ways. One, the conference I was talking about took place in 2021. The web page that he found referred to an event that was advertising something that was to have happened in 2017, but does not look like it happened, because I've looked everywhere and I can find no evidence that this symposium actually took place. But even further, I spoke to Cal Beisner. So I not only interviewed him for my book, as soon as someone brought this up, because he told me I never did these events. So I thought maybe he misremembered. So I got in touch with him and he said, no. There was an initial request for me to participate, again, in a different conference in 2017. But what they wanted me to do was to give my affirmation to climate change, that it would be a way to support the idea of catastrophic human-caused climate change. And so I said, in good conscience, I cannot participate in this event. So he was not there. So this error, this claimed error of mine that was actually an error of theirs, has been taken out and trumpeted everywhere, including, once again, on Sean DeMar's podcast, Room for Nuance. The president of Southeastern Seminary went on and said she was incorrect.
Right. In fact, we're going to watch this clip because this is something you've been shining a light on Twitter, or I still call it Twitter, here very recently. So let's watch this clip and then we'll talk about it.
You don't ever want to closely align yourself with any political party, because to do so is to forfeit your prophetic voice. And you need to be able to speak to your own people as well and say, thus saith the Lord, even if it's uncomfortable. So we kind of got tagged with that. And then a couple of years ago, a book came out. Can't remember what it's called now. Something for sale. Anyway.
Shepherds for Sale by Megan Basham.
That accused us of being at the forefront of global warming issues. We never talk about global warming issues around here. Never.
Right.
We did have a conference on creation care, which is a much better way to talk about. That's a biblical framework. So we did have a conference on creation care, and wrongly, even though she was given information that proved that what she was going to write would be incorrect, we had invited a diversity of evangelicals to speak to the issue of creation care coming from different perspectives, including a very, very conservative wing of that movement. And she wrote it anyway.
Forgive my ignorance, brother. What did she exactly say that you guys were trying to trumpet?
Well, she tried to say that we were pushing a kind of a global warming agenda that's associated with the left politically. It's amazing to me that almost all of the stuff in recent years that's caused turmoil, not all of it, that would not be fair, but much of it is ultimately rooted in politics and not theology.
So I have a number of times talked about this, and that it's incorrect, and that, I've spoken to Cal Beisner, I've checked my work. They are simply not right. In Dr. Aiken's case, I can just tell you it's not true. And I wrote a very long and detailed thread full of receipts on X showing here are the speakers at this conference. There were 6 speakers at the conference. 3 did not address climate change, and 3 were climate alarmists. And they included that in their presentation, that Christians need to get involved in the climate change issue because of our obedience to Christ or belief in the gospel or things like this. So I showed that, and then there would be someone, who was at the seminary who said, well, it wasn't true that there were only 6 speakers. I was a speaker, so there was at least 7. And then I went and looked it up, and I'm like, no, you were a student who won a contest, and they let you present a paper, but you were not one of the 6 formal speakers. So it was not an error. There were 6 formal professors and scientists invited to give a speech. I'm sure it was a lovely presentation, but you were not one of the official speakers.
Right.
And that's why you're not, it was a web conference, why you're not included on the web conference page. So it was things like that. And other things where it would be my opinion, where I was providing analysis was, well, that's an error. And I'm like, well, no, that's my opinion. And I'm happy to debate it with you and often do.
Right.
But my analysis and my opinion of what someone said is not an error. It's a question of how I view this particular presentation.
And that's a tactic I see used quite a lot. Actually, that's been used with me in several times when you're giving your analysis about maybe you've gathered all this information and you're like, okay, here's my opinion about what this all means. And somebody will say, well, that's an error. That's a misrepresentation. You're like, okay, that's my opinion. That is my analysis. And like you said, let's debate why that's not, correct. But you can't just say that's an error because you disagree with my opinion.
Right.
And that kind of is something that can be done.
Yes. And actually, I'd love to give an example of that. In Neil Shenby's review of the book, he talked about an essay that Karen Swallow Prior, if you're familiar with her, Christian author, former professor, she wrote an essay at Religion News Service at the height of the pandemic, arguing that Christians need to get vaccinated in order to, one, of course, love their neighbor, and then also to show that they're pro-life. And so I said she is equating being pro-life, wanting to protect babies from being murdered in the womb, with getting this, I think, debatable vaccine that we should have Christian liberty on whether or not we want to get it. And Neil said, okay, well, actually, I called her and she said she didn't say that. That's not what she meant. I'm like, well, okay, look, anybody who reads this essay, that's pretty clearly what she meant. And there would be this seizing on disclaimers. And this is why I say it's a debatable issue. So in it, if someone says, well, that's not what I meant to do, and I'm presenting their quote that they wrote out in the essay, then that's something we can argue about. But you don't get to just take a quick disclaimer if someone says, I didn't mean that, and make that the content and the point that they were making in the essay. And I have given the example of it would be like having a friend who says, I'm not a racist, but makes a lot of racist jokes all the time.
Right.
But then says, but I'm not a racist. At some point, do you believe your friend that they're not a racist? If someone's continually saying, you need to get this vaccine in order to show that you're pro-life, do you believe them when they're saying, I didn't mean to equate those two things. I don't equate those two things, when they have repeatedly said that. So that was one of my examples of, look, these are things we can debate, but it's not an error.
Right. Exactly. No, I agree with you on that. Okay, let's go to this next one. Number 5 is over emotional umbrage taking. I love your titles on these. Over emotional umbrage taking.
Yeah. And so, it's funny that for some reason, the climate change chapter has been the one that
That's
people
the
just
one,
want to
which is such a shame. It's such a
know.
shame because there's so much important stuff that people are missing because they're fixating on that.
Yes. And so again, for whatever, and it's interesting to me because it seems like the easiest one for me to refute, because I go, gosh, there are just records everywhere. I don't know how you guys are trying to deny this. But so yeah, that's been the one. And it was, again, John West. And I wrote it down because I went, that was just perfect what he said. And he was, like you, agreed with my characterization of Gavin Ortland's original climate change video. And again, I was just critiquing a single video. That was all. There was no other critique of Gavin Ortland in the book. And John West wrote, Megan's critique was fair. Ortland's hypersensitive response was not. This is a common rhetorical tactic among certain evangelicals. Someone offers a critique based on substance. The person critiqued then responds personally and emotionally, perhaps to distract attention from the substance. And too many rank and file evangelicals don't see through the tactic. So again, I just want to use this as an example because it was very public and it's something that people are talking about again right now, because I think he has a really good point. Because rather than debating, okay, how legitimate is it for these organizations to be taking this money from these left-wing foundations? Or is it appropriate for Christian seminaries to be holding creation care seminars and conferences under the guise of we have to love our neighbor, but they're encouraging students to buy carbon credits, or they're making them feel guilty for their energy use? And they're only presenting one side. So if they're having these conferences and they're only presenting one side of a very debatable biblical issue, is that right? And so rather than saying, okay, let's talk about these things, I think she has committed a 9th commandment violation in bringing them up and naming these names. Now, that's a highly emotional and really personal allegation. In particular, if you're not inviting that person to go, hey, talk to me about this. Let's you and I have an open forum, an open debate about how this might be a 9th commandment violation, or the word slander that gets thrown around a lot. So, that to me would be one of the ways that I would say this just gets extremely personal and extremely emotional really quickly. And it's a way of putting you in a defensive crouch because suddenly now you're not discussing the evidence. It's saying, you're in sin. And so, you need to go repent. And to me, that's just a very manipulative tactic to try to say, I can't even talk to you about this because you're in sin.
Well, and people also did this with the title of your book. I noticed that. People would say, well, it's called Shepherds for Sale, and that's slanderous. That's slandering everybody that's in the book because not everybody that's in the book took money. And you're just thinking, this is how book titles work. You have a punchy title that you hopefully will kind of characterize the main thesis of your book in a way that makes people want to open it and read it. And you were arguing that there were some shepherds for sale,
right?
But there's also kind of a metaphorical that I certainly understood that you weren't just talking about dollars. You were talking about shepherds for sale for whatever the payment might be, whether it's fame or influence or platform or whatever it might be. But it's like people like overly literalized that and the over emotional kind of umbrage taking with the title, saying, well, the title is just this or that. And I'm just going like, I don't understand the overreaction about the title because all titles have a punch to them that is supposed to be kind of like, here's the big idea, and then we'll get into the details. Did you notice that with the title as well?
Yes, very much. Which, and I anticipated it, which was why in the introduction, I laid out just what you just said. I said, look, Shepherds for Sale, yes, there are people taking money from these foundations, but there's also people who are trading their influence for media applause or to gain access to some of these influential secular circles and things like that. So, I was actually very careful to go, here's the literal meaning, and here's also the metaphorical meaning that we're going to be using as we embark on the book and explore this topic. So, what I could tell is that a lot of people who did that, again, did not read the book.
Didn't read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So number 6 here is the ever ubiquitous appeal to Matthew 18. And it says this: if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. If they will not listen, take 1 or 2 others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. This one, Megan, happens all the time. I mean, anytime I write an article about somebody like Richard Rohr or any kind of progressive author, people will say, well, did you go to them first? And I always, I mean, I've even done whole podcasts on this. Natasha and I even did an Unshaken Faith podcast about this whole topic once, because Matthew 18, it does not apply in situations where somebody says something publicly and then you respond publicly. That's not a personal sin between the two people. Can you imagine if you had to go personally to absolutely every single person in your book, the book wouldn't even be out yet.
It would take a decade at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, essentially that was it. As I got that a lot on every single point, people would go, did you go and ask this person? Like I said, I gave the example of Neil Shenby and Karen Swallow Prior saying, did you go and ask her about what she meant? And I went, she wrote an essay to explain what she meant. She wrote an op-ed. So, I use that op-ed. And when it's public material like that, there's nothing wrong if you feel that something's not very clear or, maybe the definitions are a little muddy. Of course you can. But you're not obligated to biblically for every piece of public content to go and say, okay, I just want to make sure, does is mean is here? It's obviously you can tell from the context. And part of the reason that you give those citations is then the reader is then able to go and look at the material themselves and say, do I agree with how this is being characterized? And so, that was just a big one. I think it's a very manipulative, misused verse, because you are not obligated to do that when it is a YouTube video, a podcast,
right?
Curriculum that has been published on seminary websites, op-eds in the newspaper. Imagine that if every single writer in every magazine had to go and interview every politician that they were going to comment on their public speeches. It's really, when you think about it, a very ridiculous standard. And it's only one that seems to apply when some Christians don't like being criticized for some other piece of public content that they put out.
Right. It's not a personal offense between two people. This is like somebody writes a book and you're responding, giving analysis or a review or something like that. So Matthew 18 just doesn't apply in those situations. Now, how I would apply, well, I don't even think it's Matthew 18, just a matter of Christian, charity. If, any time that I might publicly disagree with somebody I know, I'm going to reach out to them first. I'm going to let them know. Might even have a little bit of a back and forth with them to hear their side, because I know them, and that would be something that I would make room for. But if I've never met somebody and they've written a book and I want to do a book review, there's no obligation to go to them first. And that's something that just gets really misused. I think that's in like all of the different streams of evangelicalism. People kind of bring that out. So
I'm trying to imagine what movie reviews would be like if you had to contact every filmmaker and go,
well, that's the thing.
I don't want to write about the themes of your film or critique the themes of your film until I'm sure that I've spoken to you.
Well, what was so funny, the first time somebody said that to me was, I think it was back in 2017 when I reviewed Rachel Hollis's Girl, Wash Your Face. So at that time, I had a very small little blog. I mean, 200 people read my blog. And that post went like mega viral, like millions of hits. And one of the main comments people were making was, did you reach out to Rachel Hollis first? I mean, like, she's a New York Times bestselling author. She's going to answer an email from this little apologetics blog over here. Like, I don't even think that she would have answered if I would have tried, but people were very upset that I didn't, which was, it's kind of silly when you really think about it. All right. So this all leads to a result is that leaders and pastors will just refuse to read the book. They won't actually engage with the material. So talk about how that happened with you.
So people would so often come up to me at conferences and tell me that, they read the book and it dovetailed exactly with their personal experiences in, ministries they were working in or in their churches. They experienced critical race theory or social justice preoccupations coming into their church and dividing the body and creating enmity between brothers and sisters. And, we're extremely concerned about things like that. So I didn't have to convince them. The issue was the pastoral class, the ministry class. When we're talking about leaders, I had so many people tell me, I tried to give my book to your pastor, and he told me that, he heard from a friend that is a seminary professor at Southeastern Seminary, for example, that it's not the sort of thing he should read, or that, it will not be beneficial to the body to entertain this kind of material, things like that. And so, that was, I'm going to be honest, that was a bummer for me, especially when my own grandmother told me I tried to give your book to my pastor, and he is friends with certain people that are very high profile in the SBC, and he would not take it. I had dear friends tell me the same, say I tried to give my book to your pastor, and because they heard that you were critical of someone like Tim Keller, which again is not, I was, but not in a way to say that, he's not a Christian or he's a wolf,
Right.
but just to say, I think he was off base on some of these positions that he took. They would say they just wouldn't read it. And so I think that was ultimately the goal of this discreditation campaign. That again, I want to emphasize, it's not like poor me, it just happens to me. I think it happens a lot. And that's why my ears perked up when I heard John West talking about how that was happening to his book with, Stockholm Christianity. And I've heard it from other people since then, that when they have written anything that has tried to hold high profile elite evangelical institutions or personalities to account, they have been subjected to the same treatment. And at that point, it kind of became worthwhile to me to say, well, let's talk about these tactics and have a discussion.
Yeah.
Because I just found that concerning, that there were so many pastors that were willing to say, based on my friendship network, I'm not going to even entertain any evidence that that book might present.
Right. And I'm going to show a clip here really quick that just kind of that I think exemplifies this just from this week. So I posted on X a podcast from about 3 years ago from the Holy Post, where they basically kind of did some of these tactics. So let's watch that clip, and then I want to just make some comments on that.
The world is out to get us, kids. So put on the full armor of God, because we're fighting back. And so he declared a new war over like 2 weeks ago. He was in concert and took a pause out of his concert, which he does fairly often, to let me just share a bit that's on my mind. And this time he said, it is time that we declare war against this deconstruction Christian movement. He's declaring war against deconstruction. He says, I don't even like calling it deconstruction Christian. There's nothing Christian about it. It is a false religion. So,
who's calling it a religion?
What is he even talking about?
So he's friends with, hang with me.
I'm just confused.
You're both like you're memeing in stereo. It's kind of funny, the faces that you've got. Alisa Childers, you know who Alisa Childers is? Alisa Childers? Anyone? Bueller? No, nobody. I got nothing. She was one part of Zoe Girl. Remember Zoe Girl?
Are you kidding me?
There's another Caitlin gif right there.
I just got a meme out of Caitlin.
I'm so upset. Oh, I love
Why are you
Zoe
upset?
Girl.
I haven't even said what she said.
Because I read the article that you sent, and I'm upset.
I'm upset because that's our nickname.
So I just played that because when it happened at the time, I just ignored it. But I recognize so many of these tactics, like the pre-discreditation, where they're just laughing about how I was in, Zoe Girl. And has anybody heard of her? No, you haven't heard of her. Bueller, anybody? No, got nothing. Just to kind of make it sound like I'm nothing. My opinion doesn't matter. Right. I'm kind of dumb. I'm just a singer. And, then the not our thing, dear, the disparaging, and really taking, if you watch their whole episode, which I'll link to that if anybody wants to. If you watch the whole episode, you'll see that they're not even actually really interacting with my work. They took two articles that were for very specific purposes. The progressive Christian article that I wrote wasn't my definition of progressive Christianity, yet they spent a good bit of time talking about how I don't have a clue about what it is because that's not the right definition. And it's like, that actually wasn't my definition. That post had a different purpose. But, I see a lot of this kind of tactics when people don't want to engage in good faith. And so I think my encouragement, I'll say some last words and I'll let you say some last words. I think my encouragement for people the reason I wanted to have this conversation is because I do want people to recognize some of these manipulative tactics that can take place, especially when you're speaking truth in an arena where it's not popular to do so, because it's going to implicate this person, and then this person's connected to this person who's connected to this group, and it implicates everybody. That can turn the whole machine on you, as we saw in your case. I think that's an extreme example, what we saw in your case, but other people they have things like this maybe happen in their church, or if they have smaller ministries. And so I wanted to do that just to kind of recognize some of these tactics, but also to encourage Christians to speak truth. If you speak truth, then you will always be on the right side of whatever it is. And to the best of your ability, with a clean conscience before the Lord, speak the truth. I love this quote that I don't think Athanasius actually said, because I can't find a citation for it, but it's still such a good quote, and I'm going to say it and just wish that Athanasius said it. And that's when he said, "If the world is against truth, then I am against the world." And so he's kind of known as Athanasius contra mundi, Athanasius against the world, because there was so much pressure. Even when the heretics gained control of the narrative, even back then, he still says, no, if the world, I hope he said this, I can't find the citation, if the world is against truth, then I'm against the world. And we can't just say something or concede something because this group might not like that we're saying it, or this group might take offense. We have to speak truth, knowing that we are going to face Jesus, each one of us, all by ourselves. Like, none of those people are going to be there either accusing you or defending you. It's going to be you and Jesus. And so I would just encourage Christians to make Scripture your authority, speak truth to the best you can, repent when you get it wrong. I've done that. You've done that. But speak truth, and don't worry about, just let the chips fall where they may. What final words do you have for us, Megan?
Yeah, probably mine would be, I just really want to emphasize that there is a kind of criticism and tearing down that's purpose is to destroy faith and destroy the church. And that's absolutely not what we want to engage in. I don't believe it is what I have engaged in. It's something born out of love for the church and wanting to build up the church. If we talk specifically about the SBC, which I'm a part of, it's a part of wanting to say, I don't want destructive and unbiblical ideologies to take root in churches that I love and organizations that I love. And so part of this is a refining conversation. So it's something very different from the deconstructing conversation. And so, that's just kind of my appeal, is that let us reason these things out together, and let us do it in good faith, and do it, I think, in open forums is good. And not take personal offense, because we all love the church. We all love these institutions, and we all want them to be healthy.
Yeah, very good. All right, everybody, get Megan's book, Shepherds for Sale. If you haven't read it yet, you need to read it. Evaluate it for yourself. And again, just want to reiterate, she's not saying everybody she talks about is a heretic or a wolf or not a Christian. This is just some serious corruption that she has unmasked, that has trickled down. And we want to be careful that we're not inadvertently repeating talking points that come from some of this corruption. So that's my heart, and I hope that as we pursue Christ, we'll keep a sharp mind, a soft heart, and a thick skin.